Take it easy. Take it easy.
Hey everyone, welcome into the pod. I'm Nate, and I'm joined by my good buddy Tony.
Hello.
And today we have a special guest, some guy we dragged in off the street who looked like he needed some friends. Canaan, why don't you say hey to everyone?
Howdy, howdy.
He does look kind of homeless in person.
It depends on the day.
Canaan is my brother of many years, and Canaan and Tony are good buddies as well. He's a good guy in general. He loves Jesus, and he's wise, and he's smart. And with our topic today, we were really interested to see what he would have to add here. Because our topic is the big concept of killing with kindness. What's the deal, and how do we navigate, as Jesus followers or otherwise, conflict?
Absolutely, Nate. I think just conflict in general in today's world, it's like when, everyone has to deal with it whenever it's conflict in your friends and family relationships. God knows it's there whenever we want it or not. But even conflict with strangers, and so I am kind of obsessed with this thought of like, what's the right way to like preemptively prepare ourselves for potential conflict, because so many times I know in my life, it's responsive. It's something comes up unexpected. And then all of a sudden I'm responding to that conflict with whatever feels right or whatever I feel justified about, and that makes me take a couple of steps back and ask myself, is that the most intelligent thing I can do? Is there a better way? And so I'm definitely interested in what you're bringing up.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about conflict, there's a pretty wide range of what we can mean when we talk about conflict. Verbal conflict, or emotional conflict, relational conflict, or literal like physical danger, like life-threatening type conflict. When I say conflict or conflict resolution, for you two, Tony and Canaan, what is like in terms of the way you experience conflict on a like normal basis, or something that wouldn't feel totally alien to you in terms of what conflict would look like? What do you first blush think of?
Oh man, for me, I've been dealing with this a lot lately. So the first thing that comes to my mind is conflict between my kids, for sure.
Oh, Canaan, that's really not what we're looking for. That's not really appropriate.
Perfect.
No,
Perfect. Yes,
I'm just
thank
kidding.
you.
That's perfect.
Thank you.
Please continue.
I'm done. No, yeah, I don't know. I just, my kids fight a lot. I've got two boys, a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and then we have a 2-year-old little girl as well. And so it seems like a constant conflict in our house. How do we manage that? How do we help them not have conflict? So that's the first thing that just comes to my mind, is just between my kids.
Yeah, I'll say what you just said triggers in my mind. Unfortunately, it's like, as much as I would love to prevent conflict, I would love to see a reality where you don't have to be in a fight. You don't have to do these things that you might regret later on or be a part of later on. It's like, at the end of the day, it's like, no matter how great my household is or how great my relationships are, it's like there's no avoiding conflict. Sooner or later, we're all going to have to be dealing with it thrust upon us one way or another,
Yeah. Nobody in any of your relational circles, including you, is perfect.
Exactly.
Which means there's going to be friction, and there's going to be moments where one or more people overstep a line, and things can escalate or not. Probably for none of the three of us, physical conflict is a part of our normal reality, like in terms of like the danger of physical violence, the threat of physical violence. Probably it's more.
I'm married to Taylor.
Well,
so
yeah,
I'm in constant
Well,
danger.
don't name names.
Your wife has done Brazilian jiu-jitsu, so I would.
There you go.
She puts me down on the ground,
Canaan, you said with your kids. Tony, you said just in a relational sense. And then probably Canaan would say yes, also in marriage, and I also have kids,
for sure.
and I would say yes,
Yeah.
marriage, and yes with kids. With kids is a really interesting one to me, because you almost get like a little picture of like, if these are full-grown humans with this level of maturity and wisdom in terms of conflict resolution, you're like, oh yeah, this is why people just kill each other. Like, this is why people just like go to war and steal and like do terrible things to each other, because there's such a lack with kids of the wisdom to like just navigate anger and one person being a turd and responding in kind and whatever else. You can just see how, well, what if those two little people were also full of the pride of adulthood and then
Mhm.
also had the
Yeah,
strength to just maul each other?
yeah,
It's like there
absolutely.
you get the bigger kinds of conflicts. Yeah. This, as we were talking about this topic of conflict resolution and like the Christian approach or just the wise approach versus some more common approaches. Um, if I were to say, or if I were to ask you two what you think of when you think of the way the world in general attempts to deal with conflict, for better or for worse, what would come to your minds?
Yeah, for better or for worse, I think that whenever it's there's something right or wrong about it, there's this notion that I am always right. Like
Yeah.
whenever
Hmm.
I am actively saying it to myself or actively saying it to some other person, which there are some people out there who, there's a fine line between cockiness and confidence, and some people just blow that away. But I think more often than not, there is this underlying of I am right. And what I am experiencing or what I am wanting or the way I view it is the right way. And
Yeah.
anyone
Trumps whatever you think. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, anyone who doesn't see it the same way or doesn't agree with whatever path that I think we should go on or the solution that I'm providing, well, then they are obviously wrong. And man, I there's so much inside of me that just rebels against that. I think it's such a dangerous thing that especially if someone doesn't think about it and they just use that presupposition to go to the nth degree whenever it's in their own personal relationships. Unfortunately, I think the best place to see this on the greater scale is in politics, honestly. And we're not going to get into a lot of politics right now, but it's just the idea that if you're not for me, you're against me. Like if you're not on my side, you're the enemy, you know?
Well, you even have this, like, the first thing I thought of was it's almost as though, like, people can't have conflict anymore because you have this cultural sort of phenomenon going on where you have my truth versus your truth.
Absolutely.
And it's like, well, okay, you can have whatever truth you want, but this one's my truth. And so because I have my truth and you have yours, we don't even need to have conflict
Yeah.
because it's just we live in different realities in a sense. And it's almost like this, at least in America for sure, it's this cultural phenomenon of like we can't have conflict because and so we'll just we'll just agree to disagree in the worst
I
possible way.
I hate
Like
that phrase.
everybody can be right.
Yeah,
Phrase.
yeah. The term for that is toxic positivity,
Yeah.
where you have this like you create a culture in which the only feedback or the only kind of interaction you can have with somebody is positive. Like
Wisdom.
you must affirm me, you must give positive feedback to my life, otherwise I will not listen.
Yeah.
Otherwise I'm not interested. Which started because it's like if you're telling me I shouldn't be doing something, or if you're disagreeing with me or my way of life, or giving any kind of critique in that sense, that is toxic. Like you're
Yeah.
imposing yourself upon me, and that is toxic.
Mhm.
So I cut toxicity out of my life.
Wisdom.
But then swinging to the opposite side of that, because there is such a thing as like being toxic to each other with our words, right? Like that is a real thing. But then if you swing that to the nth degree and say anything that disagrees with anything that I want or like is toxic,
Wisdom.
then you create an opposite toxicity where you've built an echo chamber, like in and of your own life. Like anything that I don't want to hear, I will refuse to hear, and I will just continue receiving affirmation for the way I'm doing things and what I want to
Mhm.
do, and only receiving that affirmation. So yeah, that's definitely become a lot more common. It's been encouraged. And I see it often where people will say, like, I'm struggling with this issue and I've received this advice that I should stop doing this thing or I should do this thing instead. And one of the really common things, like feedbacks in like a public sense that I see, is Like, you gotta cut those toxic people out of your life. You've gotta,
Yeah.
like, follow your heart. You gotta find your truth and whatever makes you happy. It's very much, to bring it back to the Bible, because I often do that. It's just Genesis 3, that
Mhm.
whole idea of doing what is right in your eyes, and I will be like God. I will define what is right and wrong for me. I will follow my truth, and that will lead me to the ultimate happiness.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's so true, and, this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. It's like, I, for myself, at the very least, wanna be in a spot where I'm not just preventing conflict or responding to conflict, but I'm handling it intelligently. I'm handling it with wisdom. And what you're bringing up there, it's like if everyone is their own God, their own decider of what is morally right or wrong or the best way to handle conflict or avoid conflict, it's like you're setting yourself up to fail, Like you're not going to have clarity across the board with someone else because they're going to be in a completely different universe as you because in their world this is right and wrong. Your right is their wrong, you know? And so I think intelligent and having the wisdom that you mentioned that earlier, the wisdom and be able to navigate, hey, I'm not just saying this is the right way for us to do things. I'm actually trying to take a step back and ask myself, what decision is going to cause the less harm? What decision is going to be, the most helpful for everyone that's actually going to get us to a resolution? I think that that is definitely something that drives me anytime I encounter conflict, whenever it's in the house or out of the house?
So to take that and take it to the next step, with the language or the idea killing with kindness, or when you have moments of conflict where maybe it's conflict and somebody is trying to resolve it through one of those, what I would say is very misguided approaches that we just talked about. It's like my way or the highway, or it's a,
Mhm.
if you are going to come at me with any kind of disagreement, it's toxic and I'm going to cut you out and that sort of thing. Or maybe it's just outright like malevolence. Like maybe someone is actually antagonizing you intentionally. What is y'all's go to? I say go to. In theory, if you could consistently do the things that you feel like you should do, which is not always the case, because Tony, as you mentioned before, somehow or sometimes we just go with gut.
Yeah,
Sometimes we just have the
absolutely.
reaction, and the reaction is very often not in line with what we feel like we should do or what we think we should do. Um, Building the habit to do the things that we actually believe we should do is difficult. But
Yeah,
if
the
you could
hard
actually do the things that you believe you should do, what do you think is the correct way to navigate?
That's a really tough question.
It's a big one. That's why we're here.
Yeah,
It's easy.
no, no. Gosh, what is the right way to handle conflict in an ideal world? Just to
Would there
add
be
here.
conflict in an ideal world?
that's a good
I mean,
question right there.
that is a good question. I would think, I guess no, because everybody would just agree on what's right. But You know, man, yeah, I mean, there's just so many different types of conflict as well, like and just to add some flavor, like, I would say probably, interestingly enough, conflict is probably the greatest driver of stress in my life,
Mm,
I would say.
yeah,
And, between relational conflict or conflict between my kids or, you know, well, even like today, I my wife is super sick, and I was supposed to go to our church to go do some volunteer stuff. And, I had to make a decision. Am I gonna be helpful to my wife, or am I gonna, go and volunteer? Both good things, right? And so it was like conflict between two good things. It wasn't just that there was a right or a wrong,
mhm,
And so for me, I'm like, chewing over this, like, oh man, like, I want to be available for my wife, but I also want to be available to serve at our local church and our community. And so I had to make a decision. What is the right move here? And I don't know. There's just so many different flavors of conflict. You know, maybe it's just a one-off on each thing. Just depending on what it is. Is it physical conflict? Is it relational? Is there a best decision in every scenario? I don't even know.
Yeah, it's things like these, when we get really big picture, it can be very difficult to get black and white,
Yeah.
or to have a cookie cutter response.
Yeah, something that I was alluding to earlier that I'm really finding fascinating is that not even the times when we are responsive in a sense where it's like, "Oh, man, I just emotionally lashed out just then, and I know I shouldn't have." Like, there are
Mhm.
times when absolutely that's the case, where it's like, "Hey, I said something and I regret it. I said something or did something, and in hindsight, it definitely was not the right choice." Those things exist, but the next step that I would take with this conversation is, like, what about those times when let's say you're dealing with a very annoying HOA, right? And someone who you feel like may be a little more into your business than they should be.
This is just a made-up
Oh
scenario,
yeah,
isn't
of
it,
course,
Tony?
completely made up.
Not based in
Could
reality at
be
all. You
the
just thought
could
of
be
that
the
one.
other side of it as well. A neighbor who you feel like is being completely selfish and not recognizing the value that an HOA has. But completely made up, Canaan. Um, but what I'm
Everybody loves their
Wha
HOA in real life.
Exactly, exactly. But what I'm getting at here is they are behaving in a way that's immature and not adult-like at all, and so, I should have 0 guilt about thinking poorly about this person, maybe behaving poorly towards this person, because once more, this does go to an underlying of what I mentioned earlier of, I know I'm in the right here, and sometimes there may and it might not be my decision, but there may actually be the reality where I am in the right, right? Where you are in the right. This other person is just being a complete pain in the butt for not a good reason. And so in those situations, it's like I'm not responding um, emotionally or lashing out. In fact, it's the opposite. I'm responding very cold and calculated, and I know exactly what I'm doing and what I'm saying and why I'm doing it. And so I'm bringing this idea up because it's like what I'm trying to describe is there is an approach. I feel like there is an approach that the world in general, society in general, looks at conflict. Hey, a little kid just got pushed around on a playground. You can't let the bully pick on you, right? So the world is going to say this is the right way to handle that situation. And everyone in society will look at it and go, "Yeah, we agree. We agree." And I wanna bring up Nate, you brought this up with the Bible and some specific ideas from there that there are some things that even in the New Testament calls a Christian to behave in such a way that is foreign to society, that is very foreign to what is considered to be common sense or common rationale or, "Hey, you're justified to punch that person back. Why would you ever talk about the idea of turning the other cheek or something of that notion?" So I kind of Nate knows this a lot, Cannon. I know this is your first time on with us, but, you know this just from talking with me in the past. I'm really big on demystifying Christianese and take turn the other cheek, for example. I feel like it applies a lot with what we're talking about. And so I want to ask you, Nate, specifically, when we are in these kind of situations and I hear from my pastor or from small group or just from school when I was a kid that, hey, I'm getting bullied or something's happening. And as a Christian, I'm supposed to turn the other cheek. What does that really mean? Where does that come from? What are we actually being called to do when we think about that particular phrase?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because that has been interpreted in a lot of different ways over the years. I mean, you get some people taking that to the extreme, and it's like 100% let an enemy do whatever he wants to do.
Mm.
So just like roll over, like lay down
Yeah.
and let whatever happen. Uh, and then other people say maybe it's something else. Maybe it's like just a personal level. Maybe it was just for then or whatever else, because it's very uncomfortable to think about nonviolence, especially, in our culture, red-blooded Americans.
Yeah.
All three of us live in
Mhm.
Texas, and
Yeah.
we probably all have guns. So then it's like,
And I'd use
but
them.
we would never use them. That's right. Um, yeah, so the language comes from the Sermon on the Mount. So Matthew 5, 6, and 7, which is like it's the greatest sermon that Jesus ever gave, and arguably one of the greatest teachings on moral wisdom that the world has ever received. And it's like Jesus' big picture of being human. It's like condensed his image of the wisdom of God applied to human relationships. That whole part happens at the end of Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus says, "You've heard it said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth."
Mhm.
So he's calling back to Moses, but even more than that, that's the lex talionis, the eye for the eye, tooth for the tooth thing. That was applied by various different ancient cultures as this revolutionary way of limiting retribution.
Mhm.
It sounds maybe to our modern ears like encouraging retribution, but very intentionally, it's limiting retribution. The idea is if somebody takes your eye, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to cut his head off. So there's a step greater. And you're like, well, you cut my friend's head off. I'm going to kill your entire family now.
Mhm.
And so each step in retribution will be greater than the last. The lex talionis, the eye for the eye, tooth for the tooth, is like it's responding in measured kind, right? There is a
Yeah.
just penalty for every action, but it's not inordinately large in response. It's measured in response. So Jesus takes that, and so originally, it's not like this it's a bad law. It was this revolutionary, very good thing in human history and culture. But Jesus says, "You've heard it said, you shall love your neighbor." Or excuse me, I'm jumping ahead. You've heard it said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not show opposition against an evil person.
Cool.
And then he gives 3 little case studies after that. He says, well, if somebody slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak also. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. So it's these little case studies following that basic idea. Don't show opposition to an evil person. So because I have a lot of thoughts there.
Yeah.
But when I say the phrase, when I quote from Jesus, do not show opposition toward an evil person, how does that make you guys feel?
I don't like that.
There is
I don't like
that
that.
gut, like, and whenever it's worldly or not, once
Yeah.
more, I'm not trying to say it's right or wrong. I love this discussion because it's like, yeah, it makes us go, if they're an evil person, I'm going to come against them, like,
Yeah, I mean, the first example that I can, that comes to my mind is like if somebody were to break in my
yeah,
home, right? And that's obviously like seems to be the the classic example, but it's exactly what I think of. Like if somebody broke into my home, like I own guns, I live in Texas. We have laws that say if you come in my home, I can blast you, And obviously I'm not gonna like allow somebody to try to hurt my family or whatever. I have 3 small kids in the house. So my hot blooded American, Texan blood or whatever, our culture says, take care of them, man. They're coming to harm you. You have a right to put an end to it. So, I mean, that's just what I think of. So my gut response to that is, I don't like it.
Mhm.
I don't like that. But what does it mean in real life?
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Does it actually mean somebody breaks in, just lay over? Because that, to your point, Nate, you said there's a line of thought that says, yeah, Jesus would say, roll over,
Yep. 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 Any other thoughts before I give you mine?
Oh, and I mirror Canaan's pretty much. And I do want to say, for people who are listening to this, like just like what Nate mentioned earlier, that especially if this is your first time, like what we're really obsessed with here is having genuine conversations, and truly trying to find an intelligent way through a lot of these conflicts. And so Yeah, I do think that there is a lot of merit and value to not letting a bully, pick on you when you're a kid, and to make sure that you aren't just a pushover in your personality. And so that is why this is a tough conversation for me, Nate. It's like, what, where's that middle ground, or what's my Christian faith, these Christian principles that I claim to be based on intelligence and rationale? What's it really trying to tell me in this situation that does feel a little uncomfortable? Go ahead.
Go on.
After
Go on.
you.
Go.
By all means.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something that I wrestled with for a while, and I swung back and forth here, going like, surely it can't mean that, to no, maybe I really am called to radical nonviolence. And I think as Christians, we are called to radical nonviolence, but that's not what this means, in my
Mm,
opinion.
mhm,
And I'll tell you why I think that. What he says here, it sounds to our very English ears, I say to you, do not show opposition against an evil person. It sounds like no opposition equals lay down
mhm,
and let the evil person do the evil thing. And then from what he says afterwards, if he slaps you, just let him slap you as much as he wants and let him take
yeah,
advantage of you and
turn the other cheek.
let him do whatever. I feel like it's almost cliche at this point in history to be like, what about the context? But there are some places in biblical scholarship that are just, we haven't done as good a job of exploring those things in their first century context as we should have,
Yeah.
or as we should be doing. And so there's some stuff that's we're still discovering, we're still learning. Um, all that said, I don't want to give a Greek lesson right now.
Mhm.
I can reference our listeners to the Bible Project podcast. Tim Mackey knows Greek significantly better than I do, and I believe they are doing a series on the Sermon on the Mount right now. So probably they're going into this same exact stuff. But the word opposition in Greek, and again, without getting into the Greek lesson, go check out the Bible Project podcast. The word opposition in English is a translation of the word from the Greek that effectively communicates an in-kind response.
Mm.
Do you follow what I mean?
Yeah, I think I do.
Responding in kind. So his first little line was eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, which was this radical law in ancient history of intentionally limiting the retribution to an in-kind response as opposed to
Mm,
a magnified response. Jesus then says, I say to you, do not show opposition, but really the word there in Greek gives a sense of in-kind response. I say to you, do not show in-kind response to an evil person.
mm,
And then he's not going to spell out exactly what that means. This is very much Jesus interacting with and building on the Hebrew wisdom literature tradition. It's that Proverbs tradition where it tells a little story. It's like, never correct an evil man according to his ways, or you will be just like him. And then the next line will be like, always correct an evil man according, to what he says, or you'll make him seem wise in his own eyes. You're like, how does that
yeah,
just said the opposite thing? Surely there was a typo made here. No, that's how Hebrew wisdom literature works, because both of those things are true. You just have to learn wisdom from God to understand how to apply those truths in the different, like, infinite complexities about life.
yeah.
So Jesus doesn't spell it out for us, but he does give us a handful of case studies. And so the first one is fascinating. Anyone who slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other toward him also. This is very interesting. We could spend a long, long time on this stuff in terms of like contextual teaching. I'll just try to blast you guys through them and then reference you to some deeper dive stuff that I'm sure the Bible Project is getting into. I have a huge amount of respect for Tim Mackey and his group.
Yeah, in the historical context, like you said, I find this fascinating. I think understanding what the original intent from the get-go is critical, because like you said, there are a lot of times we hear something with American ears or English ears, and you're telling me the Bible wasn't originally communicated in English? What the heck?
Yeah. Yeah. In first century culture, which hand you struck somebody with actually meant something.
Huh.
If you strike,
Because you used to wipe your butt with your
no,
left
you're
hand.
thinking of
Isn't that
you're
right?
thinking of modern day India, Canaan.
Indian culture.
This is 2,000 years ago in a different part of the world.
Oh,
Oh,
Obviously,
right.
wipe their butt the same way, though.
No, they had toilet paper back then, Tony.
Of course.
Um, just kidding. No, interestingly enough, if you slap somebody with your left hand, effectively, it's what you would use to slap somebody who's well beneath you,
Mm.
like a slave. In other words, like someone who is below you in status or whatever else. If you slap somebody with your right hand, it's what you do to an equal, but it's also a highly escalated situation, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like you are to an equal. If you're threatening that kind of violence, you're opening the door for violence back to you. So slapping with the left hand is an insult to someone who you believe is beneath you. So if you're slapping with your left hand, what cheek are you slapping?
The right cheek.
is it open hand? Is it a backhanded slap or a front-handed slap? It all depends.
No, it's the right.
Yeah.
It's the right cheek, right? If I slap with my left hand,
That's
it's
very
the right
true.
cheek.
Yeah, you'd slap them on the right cheek, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if somebody slaps you on the right cheek, implying they're slapping you with their left hand, Jesus says, well, don't slap their right cheek with your left hand either. Or also don't just walk away and don't just let it happen. Notice here, the language is very, very specific. He says, in a sense, it's like, look at them and then turn your other cheek over to them. And it's like, I'm not going to engage you on this level of tiny insult. I'm going to offer you this side. If you want to escalate this, you can escalate this. I'm not rolling over. I'm not lying down, but I'm also not going to engage in this slapping contest with you.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting, like, subversion of that culture's way of low class squabbling, if that makes sense. It's like, I'm going to throw some mud on you by insulting you in this way. It's like, okay, I'm not going to respond the way you think I'm going to respond, which is to slap you with my left hand. I'm going to turn my other cheek and stare you down while I do it. Not to flex on you or whatever, but it is a very, very intentional and, to the ears of a Jewish crowd, a very, very different response to
Yeah,
that kind of insult or
That's
violence.
I find that fascinating. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes, if at all possible, of someone in the Jewish crowd listening to that, right? Off of what you've told us about the context of like the eye for the eye and everything. And so I'm gonna put this in my own words and you let me know if I'm at least tracking in the right direction. But like if I'm in that situation and someone slaps me with my left hand, historically, before the Old Testament, before the eye for the eye concept that de-escalates, I could slap them with my right hand, right? It's not an equal. The left hand would have been an equal escalation or not an escalation, equal response. But instead, I want to hit them with my right hand. How dare they insult me? I'm gonna turn this into an actual fight. Whereas, as a good Jew, I know that, the Old Testament or the eye for the eye concept limits that, right? So someone slaps me with my left hand, I shouldn't slap them my right hand. I should only slap them with no more than my left hand in return, an eye for an eye. But Jesus came along and he's saying, look, when someone slaps you with their left hand, and there's that gut of you that wants to hit them with your right or respond in kind with the left, don't even play their game. Don't back down. Do something that is so foreign to the person who just slapped you that it kind of shakes them and makes them go, "What? You're not going to slap me back? You're willing to let me escalate it, but you're not the one choosing to escalate it yourself?" Like I find that very interesting. Would you say that that's a correct direction that I'm understanding that?
Yeah. And actually, even as we're talking about this, I misquoted a detail to you guys. It wasn't the left hand that you slapped somebody with; it was the back of your hand.
Okay.
So I apologize.
I was
Yes,
right.
you were.
I was
you
right.
You were totally right. Even as you said that, I was like rolling that around. I was like, why does that sound right? Oh, it's because it is right.
Yeah.
Dominantly, at that point in history, left-handedness was very, very, very rare.
Gotcha.
So you would always you would hit somebody with your dominant hand, but
And still be that right
a
cheek. Yeah.
backhand strike would be to the right cheek,
Yeah.
and that would be a deliberate act of shaming or asserting social dominance or whatever else.
Yeah.
So the whole idea, Tony, just to answer or to contribute to what you're saying a little bit more, by offering the other cheek, you're forcing the attacker to confront what they're actually doing.
Yeah.
In other words, it's like what you'd have to do in the next step is strike me with an open hand,
Yeah.
and you'd have to treat me as an equal. So
Mhm.
it's a very intentional act of nonviolent resistance, but notice how it's a disruption. There's a power dynamic that's being assumed, and there is an
Mhm.
injustice to the situation, but it's like
Mm.
you are very, very explicitly standing up for yourself, aren't you? In
Big
that
time.
situation that Jesus has described. You're very intentionally not laying over. You are standing up for what's happening without resorting to violence or retaliation.
Yeah. It makes me think. I'm like, I try to put it into modern day,
Yeah, absolutely.
like what would happen modern day, and the image I got was, when you have like a police force standing off with a violent criminal, and they're maybe trying to, or like a hostage situation, and you have the guy who comes in and tries to humanize the criminal,
Mhm.
and says, hey, hey man, like, think about, you got a wife, you got a brother, you got a sister, you got a mom, like, do you really want them to see your name on the news? You know? And then, the criminal drops the gun or whatever. And that's happened many times. I saw a video the other day, on social media, something similar, and obviously the law enforcement who talked the guy down,
Yeah.
used just practical sense. But that's the visual that I
Yeah.
got is, hey, he's actually offering not necessarily an olive branch or whatever. He's not offering just to make it all peaceful, but he's humanizing it. He's like bringing in
Yeah.
real human emotion instead of just escalating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas most people would say, just shoot him, right?
Exactly.
Or whatever. Just do
Justified.
whatever you need.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
And what you just said, I think even with the idea of like a government official type thing, but in reverse, is what Jesus kind of contributes to in the next case study.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
he next says, actually, I'm jumping ahead. I'll jump ahead to 41 because this one goes off of a little bit
Is
closer to what you just
is
said,
this the,
Canaan.
going to the extra
Whoever
mile?
forces you to go 1 mile, go with him too.
Yeah.
And this one we have done a little bit better job. It's a little bit easier to dig up the historical context for this one, but the Jews were under Roman occupation during the time of Jesus.
Mhm.
They were a conquered people group. And so even in Jerusalem, across from the temple within eyesight was a Roman barracks just set up to maintain the peace and maintain order. But within the Roman Empire, the right of any Roman soldier was to take any civilian, non-Roman citizen, and to demand that they carry their equipment for them, because the equipment of any kind of Roman soldier is it's heavy. To take a civilian and demand they carry their equipment for exactly 1 mile. And that was enshrined in Roman law.
Gotcha.
So it's just a law. It's fine. But consider the audience that Jesus is speaking to in the Sermon on the Mount. These aren't just like miscellaneous people who are happy to be a part of the Roman Empire. These are the Jews that view the Roman Empire as the symbol of their failure as people, but also the symbol of their current oppression and subjugation as people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to be demanded by a Roman soldier to carry their equipment by a mile, it is a sign, like a symbol over your life. Imagine you're out there, you're a Jewish dad working with your sons in the field, and a Roman soldier comes by and says, "Hey, you carry my stuff 1 mile." Like, that's humiliating. It's there's a removal of any sense of agency. You're dominated.
Yeah.
You're under the
That's what I mean.
control. Like, socially, you are completely underneath. And then Jesus says, well, you guys know that situation? What I want you to do is actually go to.
Huh.
So with that in mind,
Who
what
in
does
their
that
right mind
do?
would do that?
Yeah, well, but branching off of that first case study we mentioned,
Yeah.
disruption of the social order, what does that do in your minds?
I think it invokes. Well, firstly, I actually think it humanizes the person who if you're a soldier and you're like, you have the authority to do whatever, and you say, hey, I need you to do this. Obviously, people are probably generally angry about it,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
but they do it
Yeah.
anyways. Like, I'm not going to be happy, but I'm going to do this because I have to. But that instantly, I mean, I would think if I was the guy who was ordering people around, I would stop and go, "Oh, okay. Well, that's nice of you." Like it would change maybe my relationship with who, instantly with whoever was doing that
Yeah,
because it's so
it
different.
is, yeah, it's so different. It takes away, like, it's the difference of I'm being forced to do something versus, no, I'm willingly doing something, right? It's like, if I'm doing the 1 mile, like, I have no choice over that, like you said, Nate, it takes away agency. It is, I'm being dominated. It's terrible in the eyes of my family and our society. But the moment that I say, "Hey, not only am I willing to follow the law, but I'm wanting to do more." It's like, all of a sudden, I'm doing this not because you told me to do it. I'm doing this because I wanna do it, which I do find interesting, but what would be the purpose of that, Nate? Like, what do you think that Jesus was trying to get across in making the choice to do that?
Well, you guys keyed in on a couple, I think, really important things. Like the idea of a reclaiming of agency, I think is very,
Mhm.
very important in that
Mm,
situation. The idea of, as Kanan kind of alluded to, you're in that action non-violently. You are rehumanizing yourself, but also even in your eyes through the action. Like if you're the one who is submitting to that extra mile, like choosing that extra mile, it's
uh-huh.
also humanizing the person who was just dehumanizing you. Like it humanizes that person to you,
Yeah.
because if somebody dehumanizes you, they get dehumanized in your eyes as
Yeah.
well. I think
Hmm.
very, very easily. So both
Well,
sides are
Yeah.
being humanized in both sides, or in like in for each one. But then I think also you really, really have to consider the Jewish people and the way they viewed the Roman Empire at that time. Like there was a building violent resistance to the Roman Empire. And I don't just mean like the zealots up in the mountain. I mean like the modern, like the common consensus of the Jewish people was building more and more in the direction of violence, of
okay.
violent rebellion. Um, we know that because you can look at like the Peters of the world, who's like, heck yeah, Jesus, it's time to kill all the Romans, and whipping out his sword at the first chance. And we also know that because literally about 40 years after this, the Jews rose up in violent rebellion and killed a bunch of Romans, and then the Romans sent their massive army, and it was like a second abomination of desolation with like
Mm,
Antiochus Epiphanes type thing. The temple was torn to the ground. Huge amounts of Jewish people were killed. Um, Jesus is constantly like calling them to non-violent approach toward their
yeah.
oppressors. But in hearing this, it's like he asked you to go an extra mile. Well, kill him to show that he's not over you.
Mm,
And Jesus says, no, no. Reclaim your agency. Subvert this social oppression into an act of generosity. And what you're doing is like you're building a bridge for you and for that person through the act. Like, and whoever's watching, like your sons watching that, are
Yeah.
learning how to be a human and how to deal with conflict over the responding in kind, or the seething under your breath or in your own mind, or the like, I'll do this for you, you bastard, you heartless
Hmm.
bastard, but I
yeah.
don't want to. I'll do
Yeah.
the bare minimum for you. Jesus says, no, I know, go well above and beyond what the law requires of your own free choice,
Yeah.
because you're healing wounds, you're building bridges instead of further tearing them down. So I think that's really cool, um, and really challenging for me, because I'm a good Christian, but so often if somebody gives me the first strike, they
Hmm.
deserve the next one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
Yeah.
somebody takes advantage of me, you know what? If I have to do something, I'll do it, but I'm going to make sure they
Yeah.
know. I'm
Yeah.
going to make sure that they and everyone else knows that I'm being taken advantage of. And while that might seem like wisdom to us, and while that might seem like the gratifying and good choice, for Jesus, there's a better way. And it's like radical generosity. But notice how it's resistance. Like, notice how it isn't rolling over, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't say, go as far as he demands, and let him do whatever he wants. That's not what he says.
Yeah.
He says, if he asks you to go a mile, go another one. Because under Roman law, they could, like, absolutely, you could not be forced to go a second mile. So it's resistance, but it's very intentional, it's very active, but it is nonviolent, and it is resistance. What I don't think Jesus is, just to clarify here, I don't think Jesus is actually giving us a teaching on whether violent resistance is ever appropriate. Like if
Mhm.
somebody bursts into my house and wants to kill my family, this teaching is not about that, in my opinion. This teaching is about how to be a human and deal with the kinds of conflicts that they would have faced on a daily basis, because all of his case studies, and there's one more that we haven't looked at here, all of his case studies are rooted in things that these people would have experienced on a daily basis. This is not the enemy coming in to steal and kill and destroy type scenario. This is, you are insulted by being backhanded on the right cheek. This is, the Roman soldier has taken advantage of you. I don't know that we have time to get into the last one, but this is the scenario in which somebody has legal right to sue you. And the reason Jesus brings clothes into it, without getting into any more detail than this, your clothes are, you would have had one set of clothes in the first century. You don't have like multiple tunics and multiple cloaks. You have
Like a whole
one.
closet.
It gets, yeah, exactly. It gets very, very cold in that portion of the world during the nighttime. So that is how
Uh-huh.
you stay warm. Like that is like, not only is it a social symbol, but that is also very, very practically your warmth.
Yeah, you're right.
So without going into it beyond that, if somebody is going so far to take advantage of you that they are suing you to take even your tunic from you, Jesus is saying, go even above and beyond. Turn a situation of oppression into a situation of very intentional resistance that is, it's generous. It also, it leaves you naked, by the way. If you've given up your tunic and cloak, you have nothing on, just so we're clear.
Mhm.
So it turns the situation into an over the top thing that demonstrates both to the person who's doing it exactly what they're doing and everyone around exactly what they're doing, but it's also reclaiming agency. So there's a resistance, but it is non-violent. Again, all these things are, this is not a
Right.
murder situation here. All of these, they would have had these things happen to them or know somebody who had happened to them on a regular basis.
Yeah,
So
it's very radical, like you said. I mean, that
yeah,
and it's very counterculture. Honestly, something that goes through my mind right now, this is, not to bring in trivial, but a TV show that I'm sure maybe you guys have seen. Megan and I, my wife and I, have just started watching recently. It makes me think of this radical, like, just counterculture behavior is, Ted Lasso. Have you guys seen that show?
just,
No.
yeah, I've
Oh,
seen,
man.
Savannah and I watched a few episodes.
Kanan, I highly recommend it, because basically I just feel like a lot of it's not, first and foremost, it's not a Christian show. Let me just make
No,
that really
no.
clear.
And
It's
it's
not
pretty
like,
crude to anyone listening. It's got that British
yeah,
sense of what's appropriate. So they can be
so
pretty crude.
be aware of that. Yeah, it's not something that you just wanna sit down and watch with your 7-year-old, but the character of Ted himself, like, I if there was ever someone who, without putting on his forehead, "Hey, I'm a Christian. Hey, I believe in God. Hey, I believe in Jesus, da, da, da." If there was ever someone who outwardly professed those things, but instead spoke with their actions over their words, and just the crazy optimism that this guy has, and the radical nature of everyone being against him, and something that you were saying, Nate, about how not whispering under your breath, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna show them. I'm gonna prove them wrong. I'm gonna, do this thing for them, but I'm gonna make sure the whole world knows that I was justified and I'm in the right." It's like his mentality, even the times when he gets tempted to be like that, his mentality really is one of, he just wants the best for other people. He just wants to be genuine with them. He wants to connect with them, and he wants to help them grow. And it's just mind-blowing to me how Christian that is, how intelligent and how counterculture his behavior in this TV show. And Canaan, I do, man. Whenever you and Taylor get a chance, highly recommend the show. It just makes me think of if I can be that type of person in real life where I don't have to say a single thing about Jesus, which don't be wrong, I would want to. But even if I don't get the opportunity to wisely talk about what my actual faith is, I can show people what I believe by how I treat them in a way that maybe, hopefully, they've never been treated before, especially in the
Mm.
face of conflict, you know?
I have 2 thoughts. One of them, I guess, speaking, like, more practically modern day, how do we apply this to now? I guess really the takeaway, at least for me, and I'm, like, applying this in my head in all kinds of different scenarios that I've been having issues with personally.
Mm,
But, I guess it's the end takeaway is just um, de-escalation
mm,
is as a means of dealing with conflict. Because
absolutely.
once you de-escalate, then you can go deeper and figure stuff out. But the other thing I think of, Nate, is when is too far too far? Like, you think about the disciples situation and like most of them were killed in terrible ways and like martyred. So is that an application of this? You know what I mean? Or is it not? Like if somebody comes in and actually does threaten violence, is it still right or moral or whatever you want to call it? Is it the way of a Christian to just not let it happen necessarily, but like when is too far too far? When is enough where you say, you know what, in this situation, I actually justice is the right take, if that makes
That's
sense.
another
You get
very
where I'm going?
easy question, Canaan. Super lighthearted, not a problem at all.
And we
Well, I mean, that's just what I think. I was like, how do I apply this? Because like,
Mm,
I could even think of a scenario or several scenarios where you have a person who actually is threatening violence.
mm,
You know what I mean, or whatever, and or tries to steal from you or whatever. And you've heard stories, like I've seen stuff on the news or whatever, or read about stories where somebody actually did de-escalate that situation through kindness.
yeah,
And of course, that doesn't apply to like Nate, to your point, like the far end of that situation where you have somebody who's actually coming in and trying to kill you, just because they're deranged, or just evil or whatever you want to call it. But I feel like a lot of situations you could actually apply this, I think, to most situations,
yeah.
unless you're like and even gosh, like I'm thinking of stories of like World War II, you know what I
mhm,
mean? Like Nazi Germany, where you have a Jew who responded to a Nazi with kindness, and it actually changed the dynamic of what was going to
Yeah.
happen,
yeah,
you know? Um, like that's pretty far on the edge of like, you're being threatened with death or whatever. But when is enough enough? Or is there a time when enough is enough and you just say, okay, now I'm gonna go to defending myself
Yeah.
or violence or
Yeah.
whatever?
I have so many thoughts here.
yeah, for real.
I'm
Let's go part
wondering I'm
2.
wondering if a part 2 or an episode that's a follow-up to this, which is a when is too far, and when is enough,
Yeah, an
if that might be really, really
escalation,
appropriate.
so to speak.
Your example of what happened in Nazi Germany and during the Holocaust is very, very potent because, I mean, I think right now in theaters, Bonhoeffer is airing.
Mhm,
And
Mm,
Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a guy who wrestled with that specific question. Like, as a follower of Jesus,
mm,
is nonviolence, like, always the right answer? Or is there a line where evil needs to be put to an end? There
yeah.
clearly is a line somewhere, but where is that line?
yeah.
No, I think a follow-up could be good.
Yeah, I absolutely, Nate. I also think right now, I mean, like, not just talking about World War II, but we don't experience this in everyday American culture, but as we speak, there are terrible, terrible things happening in Ukraine. There are terrible things happening in Israel and Palestine, and
Yeah.
there's
Mhm.
people on both sides of the aisles on just those conflicts alone who absolutely, one way or another, fall into the context of this conversation, especially if we're talking about a further escalation of how are we called to deal with actual violence? Where's the line there? I do think, Nate, that this could be another very easy topic, one that we could handle with ease next time. No
No
problem at all.
problem.
Well, and as a teaser too, I mean, I was just thinking the application of this scripture in maybe less extreme circumstances. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
Like let's, like with the kids or with the wife or
mhm.
whatever. Like how can you apply this to those
Yeah,
situations in a way that actually makes sense? And I have some examples that I can think of that have actually happened, in my own marriage, for instance.
yeah. Both the
But
macro
anyways,
and the
yeah, no,
micro.
good conversation. Yeah. Yep.
Totally. Well, yeah, well, we wanna thank you, Cannon, so much for joining us on another easy conversation that we have with Nate
Yep,
and I.
it'll never happen again after this, but
When do I get my check?
Okay,
Is
alright.
it being
No,
mailed?
bro, you have to pay us. Did you not get that memo?
yeah, this is a privilege. What are you talking about?
You are
Oh
welcome.
no.
Oh, but yeah, Nate, unless
That
you
was
have
fun, guys.
anything else, yeah, thank you, Caden, once more. It was fun for us as well. We definitely thank you, all the listeners who are slowly but surely, hopefully, committing to joining us on this journey of conversations that we do try to have be very genuine and down to earth and realistic, because a lot of this stuff is unfortunately not light. It can be heavy, but it's worth talking about, right, Nate?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep it easy.
Bye bye.
Take it easy. Yeah, that's good.
Easy.